Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, from the Happiness and Success GPS is Chip Janiszewski. Chip, how are you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Can't believe we're winding down April already. It's been a very different month.
It really has. I saw this great meme the other day that said 2020 is a unique leap year. February had 29 days. March had 5 weeks. And April had 300 days. And it does seem that most people have just lost track of time during this pandemic while they're staying quarantined and physical distancing and doing what they can to stay safe and healthy.
It's been amazing times, which kind of leads us to going back to a really old classic book, which, unbeknownst to a lot of people out there, they're going to find out that they're actually practicing a lot of what we're talking about, which when the first time we reviewed this a few years ago was really outside the box stuff that didn't make sense to a lot of people because most people were caught up in the materialistic world that we've kind of had to dish basically because of this COVID virus. So this is going to be very, very interesting. And I think a lot of people are going to identify this with this a whole lot more. Number one, because of what they're doing, but number two, because of what they're actually seeing in the news, on the media, with everybody that's doing wonderful, wonderful things.
Yes, that's a great intro. And this week we're going back to the Success Showcase bookshelf and we're talking about The Go-Giver. And this is, everybody's familiar with the phrase go-getter, but The Go-Giver looks at some of the laws that they've put forth on how you get more by giving.
Yeah, basically, this is not that there's anything wrong with materialistic things, but the bottom line is, and we've talked about this a lot of times, that if your main goal in life is just material gain, you are never going to be happy and you're never going to be as successful as people who give to get there. And it takes a little bit of effort to do that. It takes a total paradigm shift. But the bottom line is, once you start doing this, you yourself are going to improve big time as a person, and you're going to be a whole lot happier, and you're going to be a whole lot more successful in everything that you do just by taking this approach, which is really the approach that we were born with and that we were meant to take in the first place.
Exactly. And the book is actually told in story form. It follows the journey of Joe, who he's actually worried about his job and meeting his quotas. Very common concerns that most of us, at least before COVID, had to deal with. And it takes him through the process of how he learns the laws of stratospherical success.
Yeah, the 5 laws, and basically, I mean, it starts with a crisis going. It's the end of the quarter. He's trying to make his quota. He's got a big sale on the line, and all of a sudden, the sale didn't happen, and he didn't make his quota. And, financially, it was a disaster for him and so on. And so what he did is he said, what am I going to do? And basically, he was referred to this influencer, and that's what this book is about, is how he deals with this person who's the connector for everything. And he connects him to 5 different people, learn the 5 different laws of stratosphere success, and that's really what this whole book is about. So it is told in storybook fashion, but it's a whole lot of practical things too, with very, very believable characters in there also.
And I think it's very applicable to what people are going through now. Certainly, small business owners are struggling to keep their businesses afloat. So many people have been laid off either temporarily or permanently, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet. And those crises are not all that different from what Joe was dealing with. And by learning these laws, you can move forward in what you're doing. And let's start off with the first one, which Joe learns is the law of value.
Yeah, and the law of value, a lot of people think value is what? Money. If I invest this much, I'm going to make this much. And the law of value says your real worth is defined by how much more value you give than how much you get paid. And the bottom line is, okay, how can I ever give more than I get paid if you're only looking at the money side of things? But what value is, it goes way beyond profits. It's the way you're actually serving other people. It's those intangibles that you deliver as businesses. And if you look at what's going on today, I watched 60 Minutes last night, and both GM and Ford, I believe, are making ventilators now for this pandemic crisis. They switched over and they
Yes.
were able to do this. And the bottom line is they're doing it not for profit, but they're doing it for value. And the bottom line is when their car business comes back, there's a whole lot of people that are going to remember that just because of what they're giving right now to keep everybody alive.
Right. Very similarly, there was a story on the news this weekend about 28 people who lived in their factory. Excuse me, it was 28 days, it was more than 28 people. But all of these people lived in their factory for 28 days, 24/7, churning out masks for first responders. And they did this without going home. They stayed on 24 hours and lived in the factory because they knew these masks were needed by their community.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bottom line is that what you're doing is serving others. And if you look to serve people first, people are going to remember that, and it's going to come back to you. So, um, principle number two.
Well, before we go on to principle number 2, I want to talk about value a little more because people have a mistaken idea of what value is, even when they're looking at money. I was actually watching an episode of Wicked Tuna this weekend. And what's going on in that, this is tuna fishermen, and there is a glut of tuna. So the buyers are talking about shutting down the market, and the prices that the fishermen are getting for the tuna have gone way down. And one of the fishermen starts complaining, saying they're not getting paid what the tuna is worth, what the value is. And he showed that he completely misunderstands what value is, because just because he used to get paid more for it doesn't mean that commodity is has the same value today. Value is determined by the person you are providing the service or product to. If there's too much of it, the value goes down. If you're only giving what you're paid for, your value goes down. And the more you provide, the higher your value is. And that's something to keep in mind, that your value is not tied to what you used to be paid.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Basically, it does go up and down. It's the law of supply and demand. But the bottom line is before you think about the profits, the first thing any business has to ask itself is how are they serving others? And
Right.
the examples that we just brought up, as far as just switching what they do to focus on the times now, I mean, things will come back. I mean, there's other businesses that are having problems too. I mean, the dairy business, because there's nothing going on with restaurants and
Yep.
travel and all that kind of stuff. The cost of milk and food and things like that is going down. Gas is $1.79 a gallon. I mean, there's all kinds of, you know, things going on that we never would have expected happen. And actually, one of the good examples of people coming together to serve others is our own government, which put aside things and actually has really taken care financially in a lot of different ways as far as businesses goes and individuals to help people get through this. Because obviously, if they did nothing, we would really be in a whole lot of trouble right now.
Oh, yes. All right. So the second of the 5 laws is the law of compensation. And that actually ties into what we were just talking about. Your compensation is different from your value.
Yeah. It says your income is decided by the number of people you serve and how well you serve them. And really, now more than ever, that is an exact great way to follow up what the law of value is all about. They're so related to each other.
All right. The more people you serve, the more valuable you are, and the higher your compensation is.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
if you look at value as putting potential into doing what you're doing, the law of compensation is actually what you're actually earning as a result of doing what's most valuable for the people. That's
right. And the key to that is that you're providing value to the people. You're not doing what's best for you. You're doing what's best for your clients, your customers, your community. And that's what boosts your compensation.
yeah, which is what's good for you.
Right. Yeah. It's,
So,
and that, that also brings up an interesting point, because there's a lot of people that go, well, how can I serve others if I don't serve myself first? If I don't have a salary coming in, if I don't have enough money coming in, I can't do this for others. And that's actually the reverse of how it tends to work. The more you do for others, the more you will get for yourself.
yeah, it's basically getting other people involved. I think the example in the book, which I haven't read for a while, I have to admit this, but there was this grade school teacher, Nicole, who used to play a lot of games with their students and did very well with that, and it actually ended up being the CEO of Learning Systems Software, which put together games for people to use. And the reason that that happened is because there was a huge investor that saw what she was doing, and that's how she ended up there. To make a long story short, but she did it through the law of value and by compensating other people just by the way that she was doing things and getting everybody involved, family, friends, students. And so that's
Right.
really important.
And as the story explains, we all know teachers are underpaid, but it was the value she was creating for her students and for their families that was spotted by this investor. The investor helped her create the company, which then meant she could serve many more people. And by providing value to that many more people, her compensation went up.
Yeah, and basically the way that this compensation works is something that's very near and dear to what you and I do a whole lot of, and that's networking.
Yes.
The more that you provide value and unconditionally, the more people are going to be talking about you, and you never know where it's going to come from. But that's how this whole thing goes. It's by word of mouth because people love to talk about people that they know, like, and trust and have done well for them.
So the third law that the book talks about is the law of influence. And influence, unfortunately, this is something that's been, the word itself has been diluted in today's world because we use the word influencers so casually, and generally we're talking about somebody who has a lot of social media followers or talks a lot in public, but doesn't necessarily add any value or provide any real service. And that's not real influence. What the book is talking about is real influence.
Yeah, the law itself states your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. And what that is thinking outside the box, unconditionally giving, just going out there and being and doing rather than telling people how to do things and that kind of thing. It's just being. That's what influence is all about.
Right. And in many cases, what the law of influence is referring to is leading by example. It's not about trying to sell people and trying to push them to your way of thinking. It's leading by example, showing people the benefits by doing and having them say, "Oh, yes, and also by giving of yourself and provide, again, building on the previous laws, providing value to others, it